On record.
Okay. Welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting of Monday, February 24th, 2020. Time is 6:01 p.m. Pursuant to our charter, I'd like to inform you that I'll be serving as Council President tonight. Council President is elected on the odd-numbered year for two-year term. And I'd like to begin with roll call.
Dick Anderson is excused. Judy Casper.
Present.
Deanna Hinton.
Here.
Riley Hoagland.
Here.
Diane Coos.
Present.
Rick Mark.
Here.
And Mitch Parsons.
Here.
I'd like to invite everyone to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to look at our consent agenda tonight. We have any changes on the agenda? We have the regular minutes of the meeting from January 13th, 2020, and Oregon Liquor Control Commission request for the new outlet limited to on-presence sales liquor license for the Hilltop.
Madam President,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
All right.
May I make a friendly amendment?
Councilor Hinton?
I sent a few typos to Kathy for correction, so.
Okay. You got those? All right. All in favor of accepting the consent agenda as adjusted, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? All right, they're accepted. We have any council deliberations? No?
Council, are you going to make any agenda changes or additions?
I think do we have some applicant here for Public Arts Committee? Is that person present?
She's not.
No? Okay.
No, my only question is, do you want to add an executive session to the agenda later on in between city manager reports and item M, actions if any? If you do, then I would just ask someone to make a motion to do that so that we, give notice.
We do have two executive confidential items submitted to us. Is there any discussion about having a executive session?
No, but I would move to make that motion.
So your motion is to
Conduct an executive session between L and M on our agenda.
all right, between L and M on the agenda.
Second.
Need a vote? Any other discussion?
Other than that's what we do?
Okay, so our consensus is to have an executive session between L and M on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's,
This time, we have comments from citizens present on the agenda, non-agenda items. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak? I have a great little speech that I can read prior to your attendance.
is there a sign-up sheet in the back?
Okay.
Nobody wants to visit with us. Dick will be very sorely missed. I know, they just want to see Dick. Okay. Next on the agenda then is presentations. Do we have any presentations? No presentations. Public hearings, public comments. We have the zoning ordinance amendment 2019-08, design review standards. And I believe that has been
There's a
moved
request to continue it on the agenda.
to continue it until May 11th, 2020. I would entertain a motion to continue the public hearing for ZOA 2019-08 revised standards to May 11th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
First by Councilor Parsons, second by Councilor Hoagland. All in favor of moving it to May 11th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Absence? All right. So moving it to the public hearing stays open until May 11th. on the review of the standards, sign design standards. Ordinances, there are no ordinances. Dick will be so sorry he missed this meeting. Resolutions, we have no resolutions. I think this was a plot. Special business, we might have some special business. Economic development update, New Roads and Villages, Cascade Head Urban Renewal Area Draft Plan. No action is required, but we're all ears. Allison?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. So we are here before you this evening, basically to present council with an update on the Roads and Villages at Cascade Head Urban Renewal Area Draft Plan. And then to also just let you know what we need in order to move ahead with the next steps in the process for the plan and report preparation. So we will give you an update and answer any questions, and then after discussion we'll cue you in if we haven't heard the direction that we need. So just a quick recap. The City Council and the Urban Renewal Agency held a joint work session in July of 2017, and that was to hear broadly about economic development tools. And at that meeting, Council requested to have staff bring back more information on the process and timeline to create a new urban renewal area. As you might all know, and for the viewing public, that our existing urban renewal area will sunset in the next year or so. And so that's partly why consideration for a different area in a different part of town that might be looking for some public improvements. In September of 2017, we discussed a little bit more about new urban renewal districts. And then in March of 2018, we talked about possible new areas, and we had a mobile meeting and tour of what those areas might be. And let's see, and then December, we received official approval from you to remove tax-exempt properties in the existing urban renewal area so that we could free up some acreage, because there are basically acreage limitations on how much of a city can be in an urban renewal area or more than one urban renewal area. And then March, we did 2 feasibility studies on 2 possible areas, and then you all decided to approve creation of a plan for your review in the future of the Roads and Villages at Cascade Head Urban Renewal Area, and also to begin planning and preparation for any urban growth boundary issues and possible annexation for a new urban renewal area in Nelscott. So we are working on both of those things, and at this time we have an update on the Roads End Urban Renewal Area, Roads End Villages at Cascade Head Urban Renewal Area, and we'll bring back to you down the road an update on the Nelscott area. So real quickly, I'll try to move quickly through this information. A lot of this is background on our existing urban renewal area and the Urban Renewal Agency in general. So we do have goals and objectives for the Urban Renewal Agency, and that has to do with removing blight. Blight can be defined in a lot of different ways in different contexts, and enhance opportunities for business and tourism-oriented property to be developed, redeveloped, or improved. Ensure that traffic flow, off-street parking, other public facilities within the urban renewal district are adequate to accommodate current and future development. Improve the area's visual quality so it's consistent with the Oregon coast's natural environments. Encourage the expansion and development of businesses that will produce jobs for the people of Lincoln City. Increase property values that the area will contribute its fair share to the costs of providing public services. Leverage the agency's financial resources to the maximum extent possible with other public and private investment and other funding. underground existing overhead utility systems along the Highway 101 corridor, and install coordinated street furniture, pedestrian scale lighting, walking surfaces, and landscaping in areas with concentrated pedestrian activity. So those are the goals for the agency. Now, each district or urban renewal area in general has its own set of objectives. And that is basically driven by the urban renewal plan. So, for example, Salem has 7 urban renewal areas, and so they would have a plan. They would have 7 plans, and each plan is specific to that area about what the projects are needed for that specific location. So in 1988, we adopted our year 2000 development plan. In 1988, they thought that would be a good title, the year 2000 plan, even though we're in 2020. And so basically that was about 18% of the city, and the mission to generate job-producing private investments that improve property values and visual quality. So that is for our existing plan. I think this is the world's most boring PowerPoint slide ever. This is the cover of our plan for our year 2000 development plan area. This is something that I just sketched up real quickly over some time because I was trying to understand the timing of how we implemented our projects for our existing area. So on the left, you'll see in the upper left corner, MI, $43 million in bonds. $43 million was our maximum indebtedness. That's the upper limit of spending for that area. So if you look on the left column, it'll say the amount of the bond and the year of the bond. And then on the right of that vertical line, you will see major activities that happened in the area. So in 1990, we took out a $100,000 bond, and this is all permissible under that maximum indebtedness amount. In 91, we took another $100,000, and really what was happening is we were building a sidewalk here or there or changing a water line. The early projects were really funding basic public works projects. Because it was a new area and the city was just getting a feel for how we can use urban renewal funds, let's test it out. Let's do a bond, let's do a project, let's make sure everything's good, and then we'll just continue to move forward. So in 1988, that's when the plan was adopted. In 1998, 10 years later, there had accrued enough money to actually do some projects. So because urban renewal funding accrues over time, and with redevelopment, it gets beyond that 3%, right? So every year it accrues 3%, unless there's new development or significant remodel of existing properties. And so for the first 10 years, you usually don't have enough money to do very much. But in 98, we decided, hey, we have enough to do some significant projects. Let's do a community vision in Taft. So the agency took out a $4.5 million bond, did some visioning, and then implemented projects. So the undergrounding of overhead utilities, 51st Street, all of those major projects were done shortly after 1998. In 2001, 2 years later, the agency decided, hey, we need a vision for Ocean Lake too. We don't know where to start with our plan. We need to identify what those projects are and see, have things changed since 1988? Maybe there's a different prioritization of projects that are more needed now that it's been 10 or 12 years later. So you can see the bonding that happens in parallel with the major visioning activities, and then the capital projects basically just followed those community visions, which is why 2008 we did our Cutler Community Vision Plan, and that is where you all have seen most of the projects happening in Cutler City, because that was the most recent part of town to undergo community visioning. And then 2024 is the year that we are required to stop taking tax increment. We will not need to go to 2024. We imagine that we will be paying off our bond 3 years early. So 2021 will be when we pay our last bond. And when you go out of debt with urban renewal is when you sunset or go away. So we'll be talking to you down the road about what is involved with sunsetting a district, closing it out, how do you manage your assets. All of those kinds of things are going to be within the next year, so we can get ready to sunset in as tidy of a way we can. when we did the community visioning charrettes, the first time we did it, we spent $200,000 with a consultant who had done this many, many times for many cities. And we got a book about 2 inches thick with even another little book of appendix materials. All of those things we still flip through and use every now and again, so it was helpful. It was our first one. We didn't know how to do it. And so that was really valuable, I think, for staff and for the community and for the agency. 2 years later, we did it again in Ocean Lake. That was about $250,000. And the reason it was more money is because it took a little extra community processing to decide whether or not on Highway 101 to do a couplet, which is a one-way street going north and a one-way street going south. At pretty significant transportation rerouting. So because it's ODOT right-of-way, we did need to spend a little bit more time and flesh that out. So if you see the vision poster in our office, it does show with a couplet and without a couplet, because the community was really divided on how they wanted to see Ocean Lake develop. Ultimately, we did not do a couplet. We do not plan to do a couplet. I haven't gotten a call in a few years on that, but even after the vision, many years after the vision, I was getting a call. Are you going to do a couplet? No, we're not doing a couplet. Then I wanted to mention we did volunteer. We had volunteers come and participate for a week, so we housed them and fed them, and we had planners and hydrologists and architects and developers all come and work with the community to help create the Nelscott Community Vision. And that we thought worked really well and saved quite a bit of money, so about $70,000. And then $50,000 is how much we spent on the Cutler City doing the same thing, except we had international planners also come and provide some expertise. So what has happened since 1988? We do have a great document online that shows all of the projects that we've done, and we also have those in the office, or we can provide them if people want. But we did about half of that expenditure of money, so about $20 million. Half of that was in infrastructure. These are primarily infrastructure types of plans. So undergrounding utilities, storm drainage, traffic signals, crosswalks, sidewalks, streets, water, and sewer. Tourism or parks, we did about 20% of that $43 million. And that would be tourist information facilities, public restrooms. We did Ocean Lake Park, Siletz Bay Park, some public plazas, D-Lake Park, some different things like that. Development, what we're considering cultural facilities and public parking, we did what that expenditure was about 15%, and then 7% was property rehabilitation. So our facade improvement loan program, which now we call our economic development toolbox because it has more than just facade improvement loan, was about 7% of that $43 million. So that's kind of how we have done urban renewal here with the allocation of funds. And then just a few projects that we have done with urban renewal is the Southwest Jetty Realignment Project. This was in Cutler City. Realigned a street section to Highway 101, and we turned the one-way street into two-way, and we were able to create a contiguous ownership of some parcels down there that are now under redevelopment. The Southwest 62nd to 63rd Street sidewalk section, this is in front of the Roby's furniture store, and you can see on the left there's a before picture of gravel and just flush to the highway. You know, we just typically regrade and fill the gravel, or the private property owner does, and then after with the sidewalk section.
That's a question.
Sure.
So I remember for that, there was a lot of concern over the water and the rain and flooding properties. Have we been back to monitor that?
As far as I know, there haven't been any issues, but I can check with that. I know Public Works is keeping track of.
I mean, that was like the biggest reason why is because the sheeting would go
Yeah.
into property, so.
For this one, I haven't heard anything. I think for the jetty realignment project,
That's
I think
okay.
that one we definitely heard some public comment about concerns with water, and I have not heard any complaints.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, you're right. I
Yeah.
got them mixed up.
Thanks for following up on that. The Cutler City pump station, speed table, and sidewalks. So Public Works needed to replace a pump station, and After doing community visioning, we heard that people wanted to make things look a little more aesthetically pleasing. And so Urban Renewal partnered with Public Works to create a more cottage look to the pump station. And there's landscaping and lighting, and then a speed table crosswalk that goes to the bay, to bay access. Schooner Point Highway 101 Turnout. This was an unimproved section of ODOT right-of-way, and we created parking, more organized traffic flow, and landscaping and interpretive signage for ODOT. I like to remind them of that. Doesn't your right-of-way look great? The D-Lake Utility Undergrounding. This is our most recent project that's not in Cutler City, and so you can see before and after there. Both sides of Highway 101. And then West Devils Lake Road Pump Station upgrade. This was needed, Public Works project, and in order to build capacity in the north end of the city, Urban Renewal funded about $1 million upgrade to this pump station. The Cultural Center. Urban Renewal Agency purchased the building from the school district and provided it to our partner nonprofit, the 4 Cs, now the Lincoln City Cultural Center, who have invested over $1 million in improvements to the building, capital improvements, and doubled our investment initially, and now this is owned by the city, as you know. Lincoln City Glass Studio, this was the Ballard Motors building, and this was an Urban Renewal purchase to actually just get street right-of-way. And then the building was left over as what we call an uneconomic remainder, and we didn't know what to do with it. And in 2003, I think, it underwent a brownfield remediation project. So Urban Renewal cleaned up the site and worked with the Visitor and Convention Bureau, now Explore Lincoln City, about this idea that Jennifer Sears had to create an opportunity for people to view glass float blowing, which then turned into you can blow your own glass float, and now it'll be 15 years. I believe they're celebrating their 15-year anniversary this Saturday. And that's it for the year 2000 Urban Renewal area. Are there any questions on that? We'll get to the next part here. So there was a request at the advisory committee. So you all have created an advisory committee to assist with this creation of a draft urban renewal plan. And at the advisory committee, there was a request to basically talk about examples of what other cities have done with urban renewal, just so we can see how are we doing, how are other cities doing. And so Elaine Howard, our consultant here, has provided a PowerPoint for us to go through.
And again, I'll flip through these rather quickly, but if you have a question, just stop me and I can stop and explain. This beginning one is in the city of Lake Oswego at their Millennium Park Plaza. So this is part of a redevelopment project that is ground floor commercial and residential on top, market rate residential. It abuts Millennium Park Plaza, which was also done with an urban renewal, and it is a gathering spot in downtown Lake Oswego where all of the Saturday's market is. They have a holiday market in the wintertime. They have movies in the park, so it brings people to the center of the city. This is wayfinding, which is one of the things that's being talked about in the Roads End Villages at Cascade. So a couple of these are yours. And then Troutdale also has a beautiful arch. The city of Redmond has another one. So this is something that's done and creates a really nice entryway to an area. This is more wayfinding in Pendleton, where it is the bigger wayfinding of how to find the downtown, how to find the museums, but then also more specific to the shops in the downtown area. Streetscape projects are really common urban renewal projects. This particular one in Sisters is a really great example of streetscape. Not all of this, in fact, a very small portion of this was funded with urban renewal. It actually was funded as an ODOT project, and one of the few ODOT projects where they do a great job, or they did a great job working with the local community and doing streetscape. But it is a typical kind of thing that's done with urban renewal in urban renewal areas. This is Estacada, and they did a similar streetscape project, and it was funded through their urban renewal program. This is underground and utilities. You have your great example. This is actually in Seaside, and we stood on one position on the sidewalk and took the picture, and then we turned around and took the other picture, and you can see the vast difference that undergrounding, and you have your own examples of that, but it makes a really big difference in a community. This is placemaking. This is actually in Colorado, but it is done also with urban renewal. And this, it's in their downtown in Grand Junction, Colorado, and they've done these small pocket parks right in the commercial areas of the downtown to try to bring, again, families and people to the downtown to frequent the businesses. The top one is in Wilsonville, and those little cherubs are my grandchildren. So I like showing this picture. The bottom one is just some outdoor commercial space that, again, helps bring that kind of placemaking to a locality. This is an affordable housing project done in the city of Albany. It was a mobile home park that was a place where there was a lot of crime and a lot of problems. The city worked with the owner, bought out the mobile home park, relocated the residents. Some of them got relocated into this facility. It partnered with many other sources of funds, but you can see that the urban renewal contribution was only 14% of the total project, but that 14% is what got the project economically over the bump to allow it to be economically feasible. This is the Face Rock Creamery down in Bandon, so many of you have probably seen that if you've gone south down the coast. It was a project done with the Bandon Urban Renewal Agency. They put in the parking lot and the sidewalks and the public restroom. The owner of the creamery maintains all of that so that the city didn't have to take on the maintenance responsibilities of it, and provides a really nice local tourist attraction at the entrance to the city. Excuse me, this is the Westland Historic Area. So again, an example of what can be done with urban renewal, and in the picture on the bottom, that's a new project that is ground floor commercial and offices up above, so it's not residential up above. I was really hoping that it was, but it's offices up above. And again, this one is not done with urban renewal funds, but is reminiscent of the types of things that you can do in terms of creating commercial areas and creating spaces within a city. It's another picture of that.
Okay, so now we'll get to the actual update. So what we'll do is a review of the boundary of the possible new urban renewal area. We'll review the public input to date. Jody Mesher is here, our economic development coordinator. She's been diligently tracking input. And then we'll review the project list, and we'll do a review of the financial update so you can hear where we're at. So this is the boundary. It hasn't changed in the last set of meetings. I know in the beginning when we got started, like from the feasibility study, we had a boundary A and a boundary B. The boundary A is what we are going to be having before you at some point, should you want to go down the road to adopt the draft plan area. And the boundary A is everything is in the city limits. As soon as we leave the city limits, we end up with just a different scenario of how to adopt your draft plan. And so if it goes into the county, then we also need the county to approve the plan. And so it just gets a little administratively more complex, but it is still possible to do. This is the boundary A. and the boundary B in blue. So it's a little bit difficult, but you can see there's stripes for boundary A and then a turquoise shaded area for boundary B. And so again, boundary B can be something you can consider down the road should you adopt the draft plan. Boundary A would be what you would adopt. And then anytime after that happens, you can decide to change or amend your boundary and bring in other properties. Of course, the same situation would happen where you would do annexation of those properties before you brought them into your boundary, or I believe then still the county would need to somehow approve your plan. Is that right, Elaine? Not once they're annexed. Okay, yeah. And so those areas, the reason for those B boundary shaded areas is that they're either in the existing urban renewal area now, which we're waiting to go away, or they are outside the city limits. And they do represent some projects that we have talked about since we started this process. But as the draft list of projects stands now, all the projects that are in this idea of the draft plan are in the boundary A. So if it's outside boundary A, it can't be in your plan. And so when you amend an area to include new projects and thus new acreage to do those projects, then the project list and the boundary area kind of coincide with changing to address those projects. Okay, Jody?
So part of the process is collecting public input on the project list. So we held a public forum on January 7th at Ace's Bar and Grill. We had about 58 people there, which was great to see, a lot of informed and involved community members. And so what we did, we went through the list of projects, which is in your materials there, and we went through the project descriptions, and we had posters on the wall with pictures of the different projects, and we gave each person 1 blue sticker and 5 green stickers, and we asked them to place the blue sticker next to the project they felt was the highest priority, and then the 5 additional green stickers we asked them to place on projects that were high priority but not necessarily the highest. And from there we created a priority score for each project. So we multiplied the blue stickers by 3 to give that project more weight, and then added the additional green stickers. And the graph there, it's kind of small, so maybe hard to see, but the highest priority project based on the score we calculated was the undergrounding of existing pole-mounted utility systems. Other high priority projects were street improvements, let's see here, improved trailheads, access and parking, economic development, the connector road, Logan Creek restoration, and then emergency preparedness, resiliency, and mitigation. And then projects that weren't identified as high priority were the village's neighborhood park B and public utility improvements. And we also received additional comments, open-ended comments, and a lot of those responses revolved around parks protection, protecting open space, making sure any new development is engineered to reduce carbon emissions, suggestions for a partnership with the Chesra Planning Group, which is the Cascade Head Scenic Research Area. And a lot of projects, or a lot of comments for the undergrounding of existing pole-mounted systems and street improvements, specifically calling out Logan Road as a priority. And then we created an online survey as well for folks that weren't able to attend this public forum. And we asked the same question there, so we asked for their top priority project and then for them to identify 5 additional projects. And we got 24 individual responses from the online survey. And once again, the highest priority project was the undergrounding of existing pole-mounted utility systems. Other high priority projects were street improvements, emergency preparedness, resiliency and mitigation, storm drain plan and improvements, public water improvements, and Logan Road Northeast Port Lane safety improvements. Additionally, open-ended responses we received from that, again calling out parks projects as a priority, comments calling to preserve the rural feel of the Rhodes End neighborhood. And then protecting natural and open spaces there. We also received a number of comments mentioning the lack of lighting on Logan Road and questioning if urban renewal could address that. I know that's a big question. And then from there, we asked the city staff and advisory committee members to rank their top 10 priority projects. And you can see at the graph there, the city staff responses are shown in orange, and then advisory committee responses are shown in blue. Some of the high priority projects for this group was street improvements, Connector Road, and economic development, and the Logan Creek restoration, as well as public water improvements were all high priority. And then projects not identified by this group as high priority were traffic signals and the village neighborhood parks. B, an improved public transportation and Northeast 47th Extension received less responses as well. So overall key findings from all groups combined, high priority projects for everyone seem to be street improvements, the improved beach access, Connector Road to Highway 101, economic development, improved trailheads access and parking, and Logan Creek restoration. And then projects that weren't identified as high priority from these responses were the Village's Neighborhood Park A and Village's Neighborhood Park B, as well as traffic signals, and then the Northeast 47th Extension project. And that project in particular, we discussed in this most recent advisory committee meeting, talking about the benefits of what that extension could mean for the city. And I'll get to that in just a bit. So that's the response we had going up to the public forum. And we shared that out on the 18th, and we held that at the Cultural Center. And we've had a good discussion there. People were able to ask questions and respond to the information I just shared with you. And some of the questions we received, what is the benefit of the Connector Road? And will there be a traffic light on Highway 101? And the response to this is this Connector Road is seen as necessary for the development of the village's properties. And the intersection to Highway 1 would not be in Boundary A, so that project has been removed from the list. And it's possible that could be added later on. Oh, yes, please. So Allison is going to pass out a few documents. So the first page has a summary of the discussion and some of the questions we went over at the public forum. The second document are additional responses we've received since that public forum last week. And then the last page is a document that we've been asked to share by the fire district about these special taxing districts and their point of view. Other questions we went over on the 18th, was there any property changes, and if property changes and development occurs, will it exacerbate travel even more, and what will the effect be on the locals? And really the response to this is we would need to complete a traffic impact analysis as part of any kind of project. We also talked about the boundary, which Allison kind of mentioned, and questions about why were certain properties not included. And like Wacomo properties are in the current urban renewal district, so they cannot be added to this new boundary. Another question that we talked about both in the advisory committee as well as at the public forum is what percentage of the funding will come from Rhodes End properties. And initially a majority of the tax base will come from Rhodes End as the village's properties develop. We also talked quite a bit about the project timeframe and the process of how urban renewal works and how these projects are prioritized. And we talked about how it's more of a funnel system. So right now we're at the top, and so we're creating this base of projects, and that's the list that we have here. and from there, the plan needs to be created. So the projects have to be in the plan for them to happen, and they'll get funneled down through a community visioning process that Allison mentioned. So really, we're at the front end of this whole process and how projects are going to be included in the plan. We also had a discussion about what is blight and how is it defined in this area. And this leads to the point that blight does not need, or the whole area does not need to be blighted as long as there is a finding of blight within the boundary. And going back again to the Northeast 47th extension and what is the benefit to the city for this. And really it's a secondary route from Logan Road. There's the bottleneck right there. And so this could be a alternative route for traffic or for police or safety reasons, pedestrian improvements to low-income housing areas. There's just in general an overcapacity on Logan Road at Highway 101, so it could help divert that bottleneck. And again, it would be a better connection for the golf course and casino for business reasons for the tribe as well as for customers using those amenities. So it would be a public road, but it would benefit a lot of parties and has a good opportunity for partnerships for funding on that project. And then some of the other comments we've received, specifically the Chesra Trail Access Team is recommending improving the Devil's Lake Road trailhead that accesses the trails on Lincoln City open space. The trailhead will serve as a critical need for the city. It will solve existing issues for residents and accommodate future use. And currently there are no residents there. And their comment is that they think partners will see this as a good opportunity to get grants for the development of this trailhead. We've also received comment from the Fire District. They are not completely in favor of the proposed urban renewal district as it stands. They would be in favor of a smaller, more focused urban renewal district, and they would be in favor of a shorter time in order to return the value back to all taxing districts as soon as possible. And again, they mentioned the definition of a blighted condition and how it's defined in ORS 457.085. And the definition might have an impact on the proposed boundary. And their recommendation is the city should continue to explore additional funding sources and private investment. And then the additional document that Allison handed out is from best practices, and it's from OEDA, which is Oregon Economic Development Association, and the Fire District has asked to look that over. Another comment we've received, again, is going back to the definition of blight and how we see blight in this area. And I'm not quite understanding how blight in Roads End meets the definitions. They say that the sidewalk along Logan Road is the only exception that reasonably comes to mind, but that is one project. And again, as we've said, the whole area does not need to be blighted as long as there is a finding of blight within the boundary. And then another comment we've received are for specific projects to be added to this list. One of them is a public bathroom to be added at 73rd Street. And then a second specific project is improved water safety supply lines to north end of Logan Road 6 at the end of Neptune and Logan. And again, these more specific projects could be determined through community visioning, but in order for them to be completed with urban renewal funding, they must be in the urban renewal plan. So these projects, it's possible, could be wrapped into improved water supply project and then the improved beach access or improved trailheads access projects as they are now. And the last comment that we've received, again, is reiterating the priority that should be placed on undergrounding of pole-mounted utility systems. And they also talk about putting into question the Northeast 47th Extension Street. They wanted to look at that more. And yeah, the finding of blight because of the existing pole-mounted utility systems. So that's kind of a lot, but those were the big comments that we found, and it's important to understand where the community members are coming from. And then another meeting we had, backtracking a little bit, on the 11th, February 11th, with the special taxing districts. We invited the special taxing districts that would be impacted should this plan be adopted, to bring these parties up to speed on what's going on and what would the financial impacts look like for each of the taxing districts. And we had 5 different taxing districts present at that meeting, and no action was taken there. That was more of just a general, hey, this is what's going on, just so you know. So we are trying to keep the taxing districts informed as this project progresses. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so going to the list of projects that are included in the meeting materials. This was shared at the first public forum, and this, when we were talking about the projects at the second public forum, this is the list we are working off of, but it is important to note that because some of these projects are not included in the Boundary A, they will be removed from the list once the draft is created. So those projects that will be removed are the Roads End State Neighborhood Park, the Roads End State Park improvements, and then intersection improvements, which would apply to the intersection at the connector road to Highway 101. And then again, the connector road, half of that is not within the Boundary A, so we would leave the connector road in the project list, but only half of the project, if that makes sense.
So
yeah.
does that make it not a connector road?
Kind
Kind of a
yes.
road to nowhere? Is it?
Yeah, so the idea is that if we leave half of the road in, it means that funds can be spent on that project. We originally estimated that Village's Connector Road to be about 20 million, and the intersection to connect it to Highway 101, another 20 million. This is not a simple street. And we would envision that private development would pay for a portion, we would also be looking to find additional other grant funding to go into this major piece of infrastructure, should it be a project that the Urban Renewal Agency decided to do. So what we did was we left half of the road in. Again, if the road is in, you can spend money on it, with the idea that 10 million for that half road without a connection to Highway 101 is not a project that will happen unless it is, thoroughly thought out. Where should it go? What property is needed, if any, in order to build that road? How big does it need to be? Does the school district need a portion of it and is willing to pay for a portion of it? I mean, there are a lot of partners that we would be talking to, a lot of possible funders that we would be talking to. So it is ultimately up to you all to decide if you want to leave it in at all, or if you want to, remove it. So again, if it's not in the plan, you can't spend money on it. If it's in the plan, it doesn't mean you have to spend money on it. Again, Jody mentioned we're at the top of the funnel on this plan. You all, first of all, we have to draft the plan, and second of all, you have to decide to adopt it before anything can happen. And so that's what we're working on now. But we're at the top of the funnel, and if the project is not in the plan, it can't move down the funnel to come out the other side as an actual real project. They can only be capital projects. We can't do operations or maintenance using urban renewal funds. And so that has to be thought through as well. We don't want to overbuild infrastructure, but we also don't want to build it twice. So that was a bit of a ramble on the Villages Connector Road. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know how we get from this stuff to actually deciding what could or should be done first. And I'm a little concerned in reading, some of the comments and that nice bar chart and what jumped to the top. For example, well, not to pick on anybody, but here's a comment. Somebody says, I'm really most interested in undergrounding the pole mounted utilities, and that undergrounding was really high on the public list. But in my mind, just sort of trying to sort this out, that feels like the last thing you need to do. I mean, it feels like an aesthetic improvement, not really something that adds to the function of what we're trying to do here. That's just my take on it. But do we need to, say to the public, look, that's really important, but to me, the connector roads, the 47th Street, if we're talking about developing this whole section, what's now vacant land and adding houses and apartments and stores, and I mean, you need to have roads, you need to have ways for people to get back and forth, and right now it's not all that easy. I almost, we're all volunteers here. I want a professional to say to me, if in order to do this project, you're going to need to do this, and this, and these first few things are really expensive, and that's really all you're going to be able to do. I don't know, how do we get to that?
Yeah, it's not simple. And what I find most frustrating about this process, this is really long-range planning for us in a small town. 25 years is a long time. I can say that as development happens, it has to run through the usual circuit of development process with the city. So site plan review, traffic impact analysis if it is required, which for larger scale development it would be. There are lots of checks and balances through development review process to address those kinds of questions about, is the road at capacity or not? And so those things are, we need to think large scale conceptually about emergency evacuation and growth. And so that's what we have done with the project list that you have in front of you. The other thing is everything on that project list, except the 3 projects that Jody mentioned, is able to be accomplished in some way with the financials that are available through that urban renewal area. But that's $10 million towards a $20 million road or $40 million connection. So it's not a full build out of all of the projects on the list, but it means that some allocation of money can be leveraged toward that project, if not building out the entire project. So a beach access, much less money than $40 million. And we've done many of those beach access improvements. Those can be done. Those are the types of things that can be done. What was your other question? Timing. How do we prioritize projects? Usually in the first 10 years, you don't do anything. And then you do visioning when you have money to actually implement that vision. It's no fun to do a vision and then you don't get to do anything with it. And it's also not good to do a vision and then it becomes irrelevant when you finally do get the money to do it. So the timing is important with prioritization of projects, which cannot happen today. What we're trying to do is set the city up, or the Urban Renewal Agency up, for options to spend money on capital projects. Now, that happens with annual budget conversations, that happens with staff recommendations, that happens with community input, community being the local neighborhood, the whole city, the visitor community, ODOT, our Forest Service partners, the Chesra Group. I mean, all of those are stakeholders in this part of town and would need to have an opportunity to weigh in on, hey, this is our project priority and you're doing this, so can we somehow leverage and get a better outcome together? So it's tough. It's tough. And let's say you have $10 million in 10 years. Do you want to put that all in a Villages Connector Road that connects to nowhere? Or do you want to do some other improvements that are lower hanging fruit, more about immediacy of need, safety, those kinds of things? Or do you want to invest in improvements that lead directly to an increase in assessed value so that you get on the books a longer duration of having an increase in your assessed value that then gives you more capacity sooner? So it's not a simple answer, and I just can tell you what we've done with our year 2000 development area, and you know, those are all things that our elected officials that you all will have to balance, and we will do our best to provide you with the information so that you can make those decisions.
And I would just like to say just about the Logan Road and the I've been in all these meetings except for one, which was with the taxing districts. But the discussion was not just aesthetics, although that would be very pleasing. It's about protection of the line. Oftentimes, the fix-it trucks are out there like at least once a week. And the other part of it that I heard was during the earthquake and tsunami or any other type of natural cause out there, it's very, very fragile, that system that's there now. So people were concerned about that. So that was the other part of the discussion.
Any other questions? I think we'll move along if it's okay. Okay.
Sorry, I forgot there was a PowerPoint and just started.
Swap seats with you.
And then Elaine's going to come back up and go through some of the financial information and give an update.
So as we progressed from the feasibility study to the actual urban renewal plan, we updated the financial assumptions, and part of updating those financial assumptions was updating the timing of proposed new projects or new development in the area. And that timing moved out from what we used in our feasibility study. So our assumptions in terms of the amount of maximum indebtedness and the amount of money for projects was reduced. However, as Allison says, when we look at the amount of dollars for projects in 2020 dollars, which is about $50.8 million, that amount covers that list of projects that we have been reviewing with the committee. And that list originally came from the city pouring through all of their master plans that had been done and looking at what the needed conditions were within that area. So looking at parks plans and water and sewer plans to make sure that those capital projects were included as part of the potential projects for the area, along with the economic development activities and working with developers on development of parcels. So although the amount of money for projects has reduced, it still is enough to do everything on that project list. This is for a 25-year potential time frame for an urban renewal area. When we did the feasibility study, we talked with you about time frames of urban renewal and told you at that time that they can be 30 years or longer, and you gave us direction at that time to look at a 25-year urban renewal area, so shorter than a 30-year area. And that's what we did to come up with the projections for this project. And as you can see, as Allison said, the amount of money that comes for projects in the 5-year increments is smaller in the beginning, and that's because you're just going off of that tax increment that comes from the 3% growth within the area. And as new development happens, then that amount of money that comes in is greater, and that 3% multiplies over time. So you can see in the last 11 through 25 years, you get quite a bit more increment in those 5-year chunks than you do in the beginning years. So just in terms of the update to you, the questions really are, this is the financial update. Given the project list and the input, we could put in all of those projects that we've talked about, knowing that the connector road is half of the connector road, thinking that it has to be leveraged in the future, and I think you would want to leverage that money anyway. Your urban renewal money is valuable, and you want other sources to add money to that. So the direction we need is now is the time to go ahead and prepare the urban renewal plan and report, and we need to know your comfort level both on the 25-year time frame, the amount of money for projects, the projects that we've talked about, so that we can actually prepare that document that will come formally to you to review as the urban renewal agency. So again, those projects come in those buckets, and I think you receive the full project list. The one area project that we didn't have a number for was the emergency preparedness, resiliency, and mitigation. So we're still working with city staff on getting a number to put in for what that amount should be spent on that particular project. If you look at the expenditure allocations, it's similar to what you've done in your existing plan, where 39% is on transportation types of projects. Public utility is the orange. That's 5%. We did put administration in on this. It wasn't on that original pie chart that was done for the year 2000 plan, but you do need money to operate your urban renewal program. And then the other funds are spent between parks and trails, economic development, and then there's some portion that hasn't yet been allocated. We haven't done the emergency resiliency or looked at the actual numbers for like the underground and utility, whether that's enough money or not enough money. So I think what the staff is looking for is your input on the process to date and questions that you might have, the financials, the concerns of especially the fire district.
That's a lot. Well, thank you for all this information, needless to say. And I think we're going to have to look specifically at the concerns of the districts, and I think we'll be doing that most immediately. And then I'm not sure what happens from this. Well, I'm sure we'll have a work session, and we'll go through all the steps and procedures, and I'm looking at the city manager to tell us how this is going to work. Like, what are the next steps?
I'm going to turn it over to our staff who knows that better. What are the next steps?
What are our next steps?
Would it be good if I ask, how do you feel about the 25-year timeline specifically?
See head nod?
I mean, what's the option? It seems like,
It's pretty good. Yeah. So the existing area that we have now, we did 25 years. And what happened since 1988 is that there was Measure 5 and 50, which changed the whole way that properties accrue in assessed value and fixed that 3%. And so in 1988, when we were doing our financial projections for the area, we anticipated 25 years in order to reach our $43 million of maximum indebtedness. Since there were significant changes in that, we actually reached our, I have to do fast math, 37 million. Is that right? 36 million. 36 million is what we reached in 25 years. And so we went back to the taxing districts and basically checked in with them and asked the question. The Urban Renewal Agency decided they wanted to extend our time for 10 more years in order to collect that last $7 million of project money. And with the expectation that the overlapping taxing districts knew, hey, 25 years is up, where is my share of that revenue tax increment? The Urban Renewal Agency said, well, we're not going to take 100% of our portion of that tax revenue. We're going to give back 80% to the overlapping taxing districts. So the Urban Renewal Agency in the last 10 years of this year 2000 development plan has been revenue sharing and basically holding on to 20%, which is only what was needed of that 100% in order to collect the $7 million over the last 10 years. And so we basically have had 35 years with our urban renewal plan for $43 million. And we are planning to pay off that bond 3 years early. So instead of 35 years, we'll be, when all is said and done, we'll be at 32. Did I say that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So that is what it took for this plan area to go from beginning to end. As I've heard Elaine say, when you shorten the duration of an area, you significantly change the total dollars for projects because, as I mentioned, for the first 10 years, typically you don't have enough money to do a good momentum of public projects. And so after year 10, that's kind of when you start with the most money since zero. And it just goes up from there. So in the later years of an urban renewal area is when you have the most revenue that you're getting in. So to kind of cut that off at the top, it just changes your ability to do more projects. So it's typical for urban renewal areas to be around 25 years. Some of them go 30. In our case, we've gone 32, but revenue sharing at the last 10 years. And the measure 5 and 50 that significantly changed that accrual. Yes.
Can you go back to your slide that of your whiteboard that showed the time frames?
Oh, sure.
I think that might be the easiest way to look at the decisions that are before you and the timing on those decisions. And that's a little bit tough for me.
So if we...
So, Allison and Elaine, plug in where I'm going to miss something. The end goal that we're looking at, or the date that we're looking at of you making a decision to go forward with this district is in August?
July.
July of this year, okay? In between that now and then, there's some decisions that you will need to be making that will lead to that final document that says Urban Renewal District is now created. You'll need to make a decision on the size. You'll need to make a decision on the years, the length of the years that will come out of that. You'll be needing to make a decision generally on the projects. As Allison mentioned, the specific projects will come later down the road as you do some visioning, but generally, so you have that list of those basic topics. Those are the kind of the general things. And then you'll also need to be taking into consideration in those decisions the comments that you've already received and the comments that will come to you and to weigh those out and say, yes, we think this comment is valid, therefore we need to somehow figure out how to deal with it, or no, we don't think it's valid, and we just move forward. So those are the kind of decisions that you need to make. Now, what I guess I'm going to turn the question, Madam Chair, back to you guys, and that is knowing that we are pushing to move to a July deadline, can you make those decisions just in the course of a regular city council meeting, or do you need a work meeting where it's a little bit easier to make informal discussions on all of the things that need to be done?
Yeah, I'd like to work a meeting. On the, if we would go to 30 years, does that mean in those last 5 years, we would conceivably get, boom, a big chunk of money that we're not anticipating now, and that could really do something significant that we might want to do? And, I mean, is that the point of possibly going farther?
Yes, although you need to be mindful of the impact on the overlapping taxing districts. So we want to go,
I'm getting to that next.
yeah. So there's a sweet spot, right? There's a sweet spot with what your project list is, what your boundary is. Do we have the right properties to do the projects in the boundary? Do we have more property or acreage than we really need to accomplish those objectives? Or are we being mindful of not taking in too much acreage? Because all the acreage that you take in ultimately drives the finances and then the impacts to the taxing districts and or the list of projects. And the list of projects, not or. So again, it's not a simple thing, but those are the things that we will need you to decide is how comfortable are you with the project list? How comfortable are you with the boundary? Yeah.
One of the things that we have done as staff, and with great help from Elaine's company on this, that as we go into a work meeting, is to take the various scenarios and say, if you do this, then this is what happens. And mostly that's if you do this, then this is what happens financially. This is what happens to the district. While it's difficult to do those in really accurate, down to the penny kind of a thing, you can get a pretty good idea that says if you reduce the number of years, if you do this kind of a thing, and you can get a pretty good idea of what would happen based on the decisions that you would make.
But it also sounds like you have to almost have a handle on the finances to determine which projects before you can proceed from that.
Right.
So, right? You have to know how much.
It's always a balancing act, and one doesn't come first before the other. So at this point, we know over a 25-year time period that this list of projects that's been produced can be done in the area. And logically, you could then say, we like the project list, we think it can be done in that time frame, move forward with the plan and report. Or you could say, we're concerned about the time, the 25-year time frame, although that's something you've already talked about before when we looked at the feasibility study. That doesn't mean you can't revisit that, but we had that discussion then and talked about the time frame, and we came back from 30 years to 25 years. So we already did that exercise. So the real thing to you now is, at this point, the advisory committees reviewed the projects. They didn't recommend any changes to the project list. They reviewed the time frame. They didn't recommend changing the time frame. We asked them, do you want to recommend any changes to the time frame? And they said, no, we don't. So now, before we actually write this draft document, we wanted to check in with you and just make sure there's still comfort level with you on the direction that you had given us before, and now having heard some of the public input and looking at the actual projects, because we didn't have that for you before with the feasibility study. We now have that list of projects now. Are you still comfortable moving ahead with what we have? So that's...
I have a question. I just want a clarification that this urban renewal, the new one that we're looking at, will not start till the other one sunsets, correct? So like the one that we have right now that we're sharing, the 80-20, that will close out, everything will go back to the special districts and then, or the taxing districts, and then we'll start the new one. Is that correct?
The tax collections actually The one you have ends in 21, and I believe this one starts in 22.
Okay.
That's just the way this is working out. Doesn't have to, or it can, but that's how this one, the timing is looking.
So this one will close out, and then we'll start a new one? Is that correct? Okay.
This could actually be adopted before then, but the actual taking of the tax increment revenue
Will not
starts in fiscal year end 2022.
22, okay.
Do we know that?
I think so.
Let me look.
It might be the
While
same.
you have another question, I'll just look and make sure, but yes, fiscal year end 2022.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So one other thing that would be helpful is if you notice from your council communications tonight, we're not asking for action, but if there are questions that you feel that you need answers to, any of those that are coming up tonight, we can make sure we jot those down to be able to address them specifically. So as we look to the next meetings where you're going to actually start really getting ready to adopt something, anything that you have now will be really helpful in us to address those.
Councilor Rick?
Well, the big question I have is the impact on the fire district. I mean, I guess we ought to know about the other districts as well, but that's the one that is of great concern. So do we want to save that for a work session or talk about it now?
I think we'll address some of those concerns later on this evening. I hope we, I don't mean to be the bad guys, but we do address things like undergrounding. I remember when we were in Nelscott, and Nelscott community wanted the undergrounding, and it was proven that it wasn't in the master plan. And even though they tried to create an LID, that it wasn't promoted because they said this is for, we have these goals about commercial and business, and it didn't follow the plan. So I think when we do this, we're going to have to look and see what direction this urban renewal district is for. I mean, I know we're developing a whole new area. Is it going to be focused toward business and commercial, or will it be more impacting beneficially for residents? Or does it matter? I don't know.
So I believe you're talking about the Anchor Avenue area in Nelscott, and that,
That's just an example of undergrounding.
that street was not identified as a project for undergrounding with urban renewal funds.
Okay, so if we have projects up in the new area and they're
Yes.
identified for projects, and it would include then the undergrounding.
Yes, it
if
will
the
include
project is in
undergrounding.
it.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't want them to be as surprised as we were.
Yeah, I don't think we got specific on locations for undergrounding, so there's pros and cons. The more general the project, if we say, yes, you can spend money on utility undergrounding, then it will be ultimately up to the community visioning and the urban renewal agency to determine what criteria they will use to do undergrounding, because unfortunately we can't underground everything.
Right.
So in the past, we've undergrounded in Taft on Highway 101, like you said, key commercial areas, Ocean Lake, and then D Lake. And the D Lake decision was made because of view corridor, and so that was the driving criteria for that investment. Would that be a similar criteria for this possible future area? Would that be the criteria, or would it be some other thing? Business development or main streeting, or I'm just throwing out some ideas, but yes. So when we're general and we say undergrounding can be done, then it will leave an open gate to having discussions about where and how and why that will have to be sorted out in the future.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? So we truly appreciate all this information. Having gone through the first one, it seems like this is moving along smoother and being more inclusive of a lot more parties and districts. So I'm grateful that you put all this effort into it. And 25 years, I'm sure will go fast. And we'll be looking forward to sorting out how to begin. Thank you. Thank you, Allison, Elaine, Jody, for all your hard work on this project.
Thank you.
Now we have work to do. Okay, we're still on special order of business. We have a bid award for the police radio tower and radio system upgrade.
Ask our chief and Tony to come up and join us up here if you have some questions. I'm the money guy on this. They're the technical guys on this. A little bit of background. We had commissioned a study to look at our radio system, to find ways to upgrade and improve the coverage that we have for our police officers. We had commissioned CSI Telecommunications to do that. They delivered to us a plan. This was when Keith Killian was our chief, on how to do that. It consisted of building some towers and upgrades on those towers. The cost that they had estimated was $2.8 million. The towers themselves were very large base towers that you see common throughout the area. We originally estimated that the original cost of the first tower that would be associated with the construction of the police building would be about $250,000. We soon found that that was an underestimate, and the next number we had was $750,000. We found that that was likely going to be an underestimate, and it was pushing towards and above $1 million just for the tower itself. And that would have been only one of the things that would need to be done in the future. So as a staff, we took a step backwards, or took a step back and said, we need to reevaluate this. It was already expensive to begin with, and now it was going to be completely cost prohibitive for us to try to go forward to make these. We solicited the help of a former employee, Phil Barker, who had worked in our IT department and had actually worked on this very project many years ago. We started consulting with other businesses that are in this type of a business, and we ended up issuing a new request for proposals on this, to not just simply to build the one tower, but to build out the system, or to improve and repair the system in such a way that it would eliminate some of the problems we've experienced in our radio system. We received 3 proposals. 2 of those we found to be inadequate, in that they didn't address the issue specifically. In the case of one, they didn't give us a price. They wanted to simply look at the study that we had done and reevaluate it, give it a second opinion on whether or not that was the right thing to do. The other one did not give us a price, but did give us a time frame, 24 to 60 months to begin with evaluating, and then going through and eventually building with whatever they came out with. Instead, what we had was the third price was complete wireless, and they actually did give us a price for accomplishing this. I'll let these guys get into a little bit more of the details as to what it means, but it's a combination of building a tower, changing out equipment, repairing some of the equipment that we have on existing facilities, and so what we have before you tonight is that the first part of this is to build a 100-foot tower on a much smaller footprint than the large one at the police station. We have a material cost of $24,716.40 and labor costs of $26,000. And then the cost of upgrading the system, the other parts of our system, at $131,971.91. $9,000 for the geotechnical engineering services. And then we're also asking we're also asking for a contingency in this, this fee. So tonight, what we're really asking for is, hang on, I lost my page, is $209,958.31. Now, that doesn't completely. It does. $26,000, or $24,716.40. $26,000 for the construction of the tower. $131,971.91 for upgrades to throughout our radio system. $18,270 for contingency on the radio tower, and $9,000 for the geotechnical study. Now, that's not the full price. That does not include the cost to construct the base. For that, we are currently working with Emmerich, our builders of the police building, to come up with that cost. We have a budget of $195,000, which we estimate the cost will be for that. We have not received that price tag, which we will bring to you in 2 weeks. The reason why we're bringing this before you tonight is so we can get the materials ordered. Timing is of essence. We cannot open the new building without the radio equipment being completed. And so we did look at the idea, can we leave dispatch in the old building while we were doing this? And that was the one that I kept hounding them on. Why not just leave them there? But that turned out to be problematic. So I'm going to let the chief and Tony talk a little bit more about the particulars of how this system upgrade will solve our problems, we hope. And then please note that this is a two-part request that we're making, one tonight, and then in 2 weeks when we get the price from Emmerich, then we'll bring that back to you as well.
Mr. Chandler, is the whole project then, as we budgeted, is $750,000? It
No.
might be more than that?
No, we're estimating that it'll come in with the contingency I put in there, about $404,000.
Okay.
Good job.
Yeah.
Now you have your weight room.
These guys.
Right?
Well, before we jump off of that, let me tell you what we want to do with those funds. Because we already got this worked out. No, this is actually really cool news. It's very, very great for future budgets.
We're going to have robots.
We have, according to the conditions the city put upon us, the planning department, for the approval of our building permit, we have to tear down the old building and put a parking lot in within 3 years. We've estimated that cost is going to be between $500,000 to $550,000. We are estimating that with the savings we have on this and a couple of other capital projects, we might be able to incorporate that into starting it within this fiscal year and then moving it forward, so that we don't have to burden future budgets with this, with that expense. So that's where we're looking at with any savings we get. So we've already figured out how to spend any savings we're going to get. So, Chief, Tony?
Okay, needless to say, we're pretty excited to have found this resolution. We all recognized towards the end of last year we were headed on a fast track to bankrupt the police department, trying to figure out how to fix our radios. But just to take you back just a little bit, our radio infrastructure is probably close to over 20 years old right now, and we really took a backward spiral in 2013 when all of public safety was required to go to a narrow banding of our frequencies. And the equipment we have in place right now was just really not geared for that. That's not the way it was designed. We've looked at several options on how to try to fix this, and we're initially counseled to go out and seek additional consulting to see what the best path forward was, and that's when we reached out to this company called CSI through an RFP process and picked them to kind of lead us forward. And as Mr. Chandler said, kind of started off with, yeah, we can get you into this for around $250,000, and then before we knew it, we were staring at $1 million tower with no radio equipment on it, and their recommendation to build out 5 additional sites besides that. And so we had to step back and say there's got to be a better way. We will be the first to tell you we're not radio people, and we rely a lot.
I am now.
So we've learned a lot going along the way, but that's why we reached out to Phil Barker, a former IT specialist for us. He actually helped build out Curry County's radio system, and he's really up to speed on this. And he's built out Spirit Mountain's entire communication system since he's been there, so he knows his stuff. But the exciting thing for us is that with Complete Wireless getting this program, we have experience with them. They are doing an outstanding job helping us keep what we've got band-aided together. I have high confidence in Mark Schumacher and his team making this thing happen for us. So not only will we get this up to speed, but essentially when this tower project is completed and the upgrades are completed, we will have brand new radio voting transmitters at Josephine Young, which currently just has a receive-only site. We'll have a new voting transmitter at the PD, which currently is just a receive site. We'll have a new voting system up at 17th and Orr, and an additional new voting system up at Highland Estates on an abandoned tower that the Lincoln County used before they moved to their simulcast system, which hopefully, according to what studies Mark has provided us, will create a huge impact on our communication ability up on the north end of town, Rhodes End, and the north interchange area where we're frequently at. So to get all of that done for 131 and change, plus add this new tower, which by the time the tower itself, as Ron explained, is a little over $25,000. But when you factor in all of the groundwork that has to go into that and create the base and all this other stuff, we'll be up around $200,000 for that whole project. But the whole scope of the project is going to come in well under budget and give us the opportunity to actually finish our building the way it needs to be. So, Tony?
Yes. We've had to learn a lot about radio through this whole process, and I believe that with Phil has been a huge help, and he's doing it for free. He's doing it because he lives in the community. He cares about the community. And so once he vetted this project and said, yes, this is exactly what you need to do, why are you doing this other thing? It was really helpful for us. When I started this, I knew nothing about radio. Now I know a lot about radio. So we're excited about this. This is a win for the city and win for the PD. Because we were heading down a rabbit hole with almost $3 million. And I was like, what? This makes no sense.
The one thing, and one other thing I will just kind of reemphasize is currently that the one thing that I lose sleep over every single night is the fact that my people step out of their patrol cars and go on to a pack set, and we don't know for sure from one spot to another if anybody's going to hear them talk on their radio. Sometimes they can't even hear each other and they're within line of sight. Even with the systems that we have at Josephine Young, at the PD, and up at 17th and Orr, we only have really one full-on transmit receive site at 17th and Orr, and the rest of it's just receive. This new system is going to create a voting system throughout the city so that when they step out of their car, the system will analyze that signal and pick the strongest signal and direct it to the proper site so that dispatch and the rest of us get the strongest signal possible from whichever radio is being used based on its location. And we've never had that before. So this is a huge officer safety thing, but I think that with Complete Wireless and the help of these folks here that we've hit on a very solid plan that I think is extremely cost effective and is going to resolve most of our issues.
And how long will this take to put up?
With your approval, we'll be able to start writing POs and ordering equipment for all the other sites immediately, starting tomorrow. The thing that Ron was talking about as far as timing is for the tower itself to be constructed and delivered to us. They are telling us it's an 8 to 10 week lead time to order, build, and deliver it. And then it will take them about a week to 2 weeks to erect that tower and move our new antennas onto it.
And where's this tower coming from, just out of curiosity? It's being erected.
Mark's ordering that, and it's coming from a tower manufacturing east of us, but I
Oh,
don't
it's not
remember.
in-state?
No, I don't believe so.
Just curious. Anybody else? Counselor Parsons?
I noticed they gave us options between medium duty or heavy duty, and they recommended the heavy duty. I didn't see, did we choose the heavy duty?
Yes, sir. So heavy duty and 100 feet. And the reason I did that is I want the most robust thing for our weather. I don't want it to worry about it coming down. We don't know for sure what the future will bring, so I want it heavy duty enough that if we decide to add some small microwave dishes to it, that we'll have that capability. And I asked for the 100-foot tower because that gives us spacing capability, so if we had to add more antennas and that sort of thing to it, we don't have to worry about them being crammed together and ruining each other's signals. So.
Counselor Hinton?
I just have a couple things. One is, as we're really going to need this system during an earthquake or any other disaster, how is the base going to be set up to withstand an earthquake
Base
if
is 17
possible?
feet by 17 feet by 4 feet deep, just the cement part of it. So, and then it will be reinforced and attached to existing retaining walls that have been built for the new building. So it will all be tied into that
Okay.
infrastructure.
Okay. And my second question is, because these towers will be so big and more than you need, are you considering maybe renting out space in the future?
Let me address that one.
Okay.
We actually have had that discussion. It cannot be done unless you change your own laws, because commercial towers are restricted to 80 feet.
Counselor Hoagland?
So it's coming from the east, somewhere east of us, and this is the west coast, and we have weatherproofing.
Yeah, it'll be,
I mean, like they know what's being put in this kind of salty environment. I know sometimes that gets lost, but
yes, this company has erected towers in our area. In fact, one of the latest ones I'm aware of is they put up a 40 or 50-foot tower at the fire department at Walport.
oh, nice. And then the other thing that I've seen in other communities is that they kind of beautify the towers to make it look like a tree or something like that, or to I know, but how, we have an extra 300,000, so I mean, is there something to
Yeah, that's,
Parking lot. Spanned.
before the parking lot? But I mean, in all seriousness, are we trying to do any kind of aesthetic value to it, or is there
No,
been
not at this
consideration?
time. I mean, I did make a suggestion of possibly a chainsaw art octopus climbing the tower, but
Hey,
that was
that's,
passed on. so.
that's something.
But no, not at this time.
Or
It's just
like
gonna-
birds.
It's actually,
I would, if anything, a bird's nest or a bird's area.
well, yeah,
in all
that's
seriousness.
actually my worry. I've already got a bird's nest at the top of 17th and North that needs to come down. We've got an osprey nest that's
Right, and
finally
I
been
hope we're
abandoned.
working with Autobahn
But
and everybody.
This, the footprint of this is actually smaller than this desk.
Mhm.
It's just a three-legged lattice work tower that goes up. It doesn't really lend itself to being decorated in any way. But I will tell you that from an emergency services standpoint, as I drive up my driveway to my new office, the most comforting sight in the world to me is going to be that 100-foot tower standing there with new antennas on.
Sure. Well, absolutely.
Anybody else?
Oh, hey, all right.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do we need to make 5 separate?
No, what you need, the motion that we're asking you is to approve the $209,958.31 that will be used for complete wireless radio tower material, M&A contracting bid for the radio tower labor, the complete wireless bid for voting systems upgrade, and a contingency of $18,270.
I would like to make that motion, please.
Second.
Oh, I'm
Second.
sorry, let me add one more, oops, I forgot.
Wait, let me.
I got it, it won't add up right. And $9,000 for PBS Geotechnical Engineering Services.
So what's the total?
$209,958.31.
Okay, so first by Counselor Hoagland and second by Counselor Coos. Roll call?
Casper,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Coos,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
and Parsons.
Yes.
Motion carries.
thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Awesome.
Okay, so still under special order of business, we have a request for appointment to the Public Arts Committee. Let's see, Councilor Parsons and Mark were on that committee. Do you have a recommendation?
Well, let Mr. Mark talk. He's much more eloquent than me.
Would be pleased to recommend Roxy Stavney to the Arts Commission. I'm trying to refresh my brain here as I'm talking. This is actually a reappointment.
Sounds like she was on the committee already.
She was on the committee, and she has great, very appropriate experience with Sitka Arts Center, among other things. And, she was a pleasure to talk with, and I would move. Can I do that?
Move to?
To appoint Roxy Stavney to the Public Arts Committee with term expiring 12/31/2022.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Councilor Parsons. All in favor of appointing Roxanne Stavney to the Public Arts Committee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we are happy to have Roxanne continue to join our Public Arts Committee. All right. City Manager, do you have a report?
I believe you were going to go into an executive session at this point.
But first, I would like to, maybe with the consensus of the group, if we have any additional comments from citizens present that are on non-agenda items, I'll give you another opportunity. Okay, just wanted to make sure.
We were going to do city attorney, city manager report
First.
before we went.
Okay, and then I will call us into executive session. City Manager, City Attorney reports?
The only thing I have is just a reminder that we have a budget training meeting next Monday.
Next Monday, okay. Is that 9 to 12?
It is.
Okay.
Is that here?
Yes.
Good coffee again?
We will do our best.
Yay.
And the only thing I have is that to report that last Thursday we filed the LUBA record in the CUP 2019-04. That's the Helping Hands challenge. And today we filed a motion to dismiss.
Oh, okay.
If you want to look at, if you'd like to read that, just email me and I'll send it to you.
Okay. Would everybody like a copy of that? I think we all would. Thank you. Okay, so at this time, the City Council will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.66027, confidential records.
2F.
2F, thank you, which allows the Commission to meet in executive session. Council, I'm just reading as it's written here, that Council to meet in executive session to discuss pre-development assistance request and urban renewal revenue sharing. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on the session or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about these subjects during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision will be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room. At this time, it's 7:44. We will adjourn to the Northwest Conference Room. Recess, sorry. We will recess to the Northwest Conference Room and anticipate 45 minutes or less. All right.
Mics are off. Mics are on.
Oh, pipe down.
Okay, we're back in session. It's 8:33 PM.
Wait,
Wait, what?
she's.
Oh, we're not ready?
Wait,
We're not in session.
we're in recess.
CJ, ready? Okay, we'll just start. On record.
We reconvene our session at 8:33 PM from our executive session. Are there any actions based on the executive session that we just referred to?
Madam President,
Yes, Councilor Hinton?
I move to, just a minute, for us to approve the request for the pre-development assistance for the village's commercial development site.
Second.
Second by Councilor Rick Mark. Do we have to have a roll call for this? Okay.
Hinton,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Coos.
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Parsons.
Yes.
And Casper.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. On to O, announcements or comments by the city council. Mitch?
No.
Oh. Councilor Mark?
Knew I had something. I saw that Commissioner Katie Jacobson is speaking at the chamber lunch tomorrow, and I'm just going to mention something that came out of our small cities meeting.
yeah. That's so long
Yeah,
ago,
we had a nice get together here, and a Newport councilor raised concern about Cape Foul weather, which has been a concern of mine. I've brought up at previous times, and I'm just going to bring it up again. I think the county, ODOT, somebody needs to do something about improving the way those lines are marked on Cape Foul weather and the sides of the road. It's a treacherous stretch of road, especially in the rain and fog at night. And I feel like it might help to be the squeaky wheel about this. So I'm going to mention it to Katie.
Good idea. Councilor Hoagland?
Yes, I do. So I attended the second meeting for the Oregon Coast Trail Association GAP, or the GAP Association meeting. And so I was tasked with our section being from Schooner Creek Bridge to Salishan. And so they were trying to find a way in which the trail can continue in a safe manner. You know, it's kind of complicated to swim across the Jaws and then get on the beach again. So we've had the two meetings, but in the second meeting, the representative, I think Jenna Bremer, was representing the bicycle trail in this meeting with ODOT, and what came about was at the Schooner Creek Bridge, the need for improvements for the bicycle and the Oregon Coast Trail coincided, and so there might be money there to improve that with a pedestrian bridge or on the other side because it's so kind of dangerous there. So it was very exciting. There was only 3 places in the entire Oregon coast that ODOT identified the ability where these two things come together, and Schooner Creek Bridge was one of them. So that's kind of exciting to have a better thing there. So maybe, I don't know, Ron, if you want to get in touch with her or something. I'm not sure how to go about it, but that was something that was presented. So that's really great. And another thing that was brought to me, and I know we've talked about it before, is ride sharing is kind of challenging to occur here. And I know we've talked about it, and you've said it's simply a taxi permit, and they can do it, except that they're not the same, and they're not the same in a few different ways. taxi requires you to have a taximeter, the company name and displayed on the side of the vehicles, a top light identifying as a taxi cab, a taxi radio or a state-of-the-art taxi radio. And ride sharing are what's called transportation network companies. And there's been a lot of interest, especially from the tourists and people visiting the town, that they cannot use Uber or Lyft, and that the local cab companies, bless their hearts, taking upwards of an hour. And so if it's up with, Corvallis recently changed their taxi cab ordinances to allow for these transportation network companies by changing their ordinance. And I was wondering if you guys would be interested in amending our ordinance to allow transportation network companies to be here in town as well, with all the same regulatory systems are in place of other big cities. It certainly is something that would allow a lot of people extra money, and businesses. I don't think it would necessarily take away from those taxi cab companies, because they too could be Lyft and Uber drivers. But I think it's important, and that's we would get permit fees and all that too from all the people needing to do that. So,
Have you spoken with any taxi drivers?
no, I'm talking to taxi drivers, but people wanting that, and the difference between and people looking to be Lyft and Uber drivers and cannot.
About a year ago, I talked to somebody from Uber who said the reason they don't come here is we don't have enough people to download their app.
I've heard of that as well.
I was told a minimum of 10,000 active users is what brings them to an area.
Oops.
Right, but even still, our code doesn't allow for that to happen. So there's a difference there.
Search.
So I don't know. Is that a?
Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion to direct staff to come back with ordinance for transportation network companies separate than taxi cab.
Is there a second? A motion. Seems,
I made a motion. That's what I did.
I'm saying, do we need a motion, or can you just ask them?
I don't know.
I think,
We'd definitely like to get more information
Yeah.
on it before we do an ordinance.
Could I suggest that you modify the motion to say, return with some information on Corvallis's
Okay.
recent ordinance, and
So since that one died, may I make that motion?
I will second that motion.
so we have a motion to investigate Uber licenses perhaps in Corvallis
Right sharing.
area
Yeah. Right
and
sharing.
bring it back at a future date.
Yes. And secondly, it's also in a kind of a interest of our,
Or we need to vote on your motion,
oh, sorry.
one at a time. And you're seconded
I second.
by Counselor Parsons. All in favor of this motion regarding the Uber, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passed.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. Thanks, Mr. City Attorney. I also, it's been brought to my attention about the use of glyphosate on the city level. I don't know if we are or not. And
Is that a pesticide?
it's called a broad spectrum systemic herbicide and crop desiccant. And so it's been found as, if anybody's generically known as Roundup. I don't know if our city currently uses Roundup or not. I would love to know I would love to know that, and then.
I think that's also a question that's come to the sustainability's radar as well, so
I haven't seen it, but
there's a meeting of them this week, tomorrow, and I
Okay.
think you'll be there, I'll be there.
well, it'd be great to know if we did or not, and
Going.
Three of us will be there.
I won't go then.
Okay.
You can go next time.
Besides the name Roundup,
It's glyphosate.
glyphosate.
Yeah.
I forgot something.
Forgot something? Okay.
It-
Any more?
There's a
Any more?
and no styrofoam. I still get emails all the time.
We're working on it.
I know. And as our recent ordinance for the food pod things, there's been an announcement that the Pines, as some of you may or may not know, but the Pines location is was bought by local couple here, Ross and Rachel Rayberg, and they're going to be calling it The Pines. And their design is to have 5 or 6 unique, non-repeating businesses, and would just like to congratulate them on doing that. So, all right.
Success.
Yeah, so it's great. That's real quick.
Yeah.
We're ready.
Councilor Hinton.
Okay, I forgot. I just have one short, small thing, and that's the transfer of Logan Road to the city from the county. They finalized and finished their last bit of work they had to do. They voted unanimously on a final order, and so then it'll be coming to us through Ron, and then as soon as we adopt, I suppose by resolution, that we accept the property and the check for $415,000 for the projects, then they'll write the check.
Hopefully it's one of those big ones.
Well, they talked about that. They wanted to have a big check so they could flash it around at their meeting, but they didn't get it made. But anyway, success for us.
I know you've been working on that, Councilor Hinton. Thank you. Anything else? Anybody? I have one thing. The Pearls of Wisdom is coming up March 7th from 5:30 to 9. It's sponsored by the Oregon Community College. It's their second annual fundraiser. And as you know, they gained their independence from Portland State University. So their accreditation means that they will be able to manage and process distributions of financial aid, streamline transcripts and records to other colleges, set qualifications for faculty hiring, control over textbooks, and materials for courses. There's the course. And levels of academic rigor. They'll broaden the range of classes also that are offered. And they'll have a new web address. It'll be oregoncoast.edu instead of OCCC. And then after 2021, all the graduates will get diplomas from OCCC. So if you can go to the annual fundraiser, it should be quite interesting. They'll have side door cafe appetizers and behind-the-scene tours throughout the evening. And it's only $75. It's a limited amount, so if you want to go, get online and order your ticket. And I want to say this college is now 33 years old, and Dr. Brigitte Riesling has been there since 2014, and she's attained this goal of getting this status for our college, so I think we owe her a great deal of gratitude. Anything else? All right.
The Public Art Cultural Center.
Yes. Friday at
I guess it here.
Here at
Yeah.
5:30.
5 to 7 o'clock on Friday here in council chambers. They have the 5 artist finalists giving a presentation of their previous work for a public art project at the Cultural Center is where it'll be placed. That's 5 to 7 here in the council chambers on Friday.
And people can give input or just meet and greet.
That I do not know. I just know
I do believe it is to give input.
Oh, okay. It'll be interesting. Anything else? Okay, at 8:46, this meeting is adjourned.